We got so many trades to get to in baseball, and I don't even know that we have enough time to do it, but we'll try to get to our best here. Let's start off with the biggest name, I think it's fair to say, moved on trade deadline day. May not be the best player, but the biggest name. That's Carlos Correa, World Series champion, of course, with the Houston Astros, and then went on to play for the Minnesota Twins, waived his no-trade clause to go back and play third base for the Houston Astros, as the Twins were sellers and Houston was buyers. So they make this deal. Now, Jeremy Pena, their shortstop, is going to stay at short. Correa will fill the void that was left this offseason by Alex Bregman. And then, of course, Isaac Paredes, their third baseman, is hurt. So Correa will play every day at third. Here's how the deal went down, according to their general manager, Dana Brown.
It's a big energy boost for us right now, particularly coming off a few losses during our homestand. We got those last two games, which we felt really good about. But now you get the trade deadline with a day off. You get to hit reset, and you have Correa coming back to the city. You have him stepping into that locker room. A lot of familiar faces, close-knit guys like family members. He brings energy every day to the ballpark. And so this is a big move for the team, for the city, for where we're going in the future. And we feel like we added this guy, and he's just going to bring a lot, not only as a player, but as a human being, and his leadership skills and the energy that he's going to bring to this club. So I'm fired up because I've only known him, as an opponent. And I remember when I was with the Braves, we played against you guys, and I'm just dying to meet this guy. And I've heard so many great things about him, and I've seen his actions on the field. He brings it every day.
And Correa expected to be in the starting lineup this weekend for the Astros. Meanwhile, the Padres, very active once again on trade deadline day. They end up making arguably the biggest deal of the day by getting the great reliever Mason Miller from the Sacramento A's. They also got Ryan Hearn and outfielder Ramon Laureano from the Orioles. The Rangers did late trade for Diamondback starter Merrill Kelly, who's having a nice year, 3.22 earned run average. Zach Gallen on Arizona stayed put. And the Yankees ended up adding Camilo Doval, David Bednar, and Jake Bird to bolster their bullpen. First, let's start off with A.J. Preller on the flurry of trades that he made at the deadline.
Yeah, I think as a group, over the last few weeks, we talked about, having a few needs with the big league team, probably adding a couple of bats, addressing left field and the bench, looking at the catching spot and seeing if there's a possibility to change the mix a little bit there. And then, potentially looking at the rotation, whether from the depth standpoint, obviously getting Michael King hopefully back soon and you coming back and pitching has been a big boost, but adding some depth to the rotation and then, potentially adding some impact as well to the mound, which, kind of goes back into that, you can never have enough arms and never enough impact arms. So that was kind of the wish list over the last few weeks. And I think we've taken a team that's, I think, in position to play in the playoffs and a very good team, and hopefully rounded it out and given Schulte and the coaching staff an opportunity to do their thing.
And the Yankees add bullpen pieces, as I mentioned. Looks like Camilo Doval will now be part of the ninth inning equation, joining Devin Williams in New York. Here's General Manager Brian Cashman on their moves.
We've improved the team, we believe. We tried to address the areas of need. We've added to the bullpen. We've improved the position player group as well, giving our manager more choices, to play matchup. And, so whether it's we're facing left-handed pitching, he's got some choices to play with some right-handed bats we've imported with Rosario and Slater. We have obviously with Jose Caballero, we got a nice athletic infielder that he can, that can defend and pinch run, at a high level. So that's a nice weapon of choice. He's certainly got more arms to mix and match with out of the pen, with the new additions as well. And obviously we solidified third base with Ryan McMahon. So I think we've addressed a lot of areas of need to try to give us the best shot we can take.
Other trades at the deadline, the Rays acquire a couple of pitchers. They get Adrian Hauser and Griffin Jacks to bolster the rotation in the bullpen. The Cubs traded for Twins utility man Willie Castro, who has 2 home runs this season. And the Red Sox were pretty quiet on deadline day, but they do get Dustin May from the Dodgers to add to their pitching rotation and bullpen. Also, Charlie Morton, the ageless wonder, his career rolls on, now goes to the Detroit Tigers, and he'll join the rotation led by Tariq Skubal and company. The Reds get Miguel Andujar from the A's, and the Astros also made a second deal with the Marlins by adding Jesus Sanchez to bolster their outfield group going into the postseason run. The Marlins, by the way, fairly quiet on deadline day. Some expectation that players would be traded, including one pitcher, Sandy Alcantara. He was not dealt yesterday and will remain with the club, as the person that's talking right now reported that yesterday here on SportsGrid. All right, now let's get to the action yesterday in Major League Baseball. The Yankees beat the Rays 7-4. Long rain delay in this one, by the way, 2 hours, 45 minutes. Ben Rice, Giancarlo Stanton ended up homering, and the Yankees are on the road here in Miami this week. George Kirby, 6 shutout innings. The Mariners beat the Rangers 6-0. Crazy game, by the way, yesterday between the Reds and Braves. Both teams scored 8 runs in the 8th inning. It's the first time in history that's ever happened. And 12-11 the final. The Braves end up winning that game. All right, now let's go to the National Football League. Yes, there was a preseason game to get to, but that's not the top story of the NFL today. It is Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver of the Washington Commanders, who's had enough, doesn't want a new contract with Washington, says he prefers a trade. He's been looking for an extension for the past few months. He did report to camp, but it seems like nothing's getting done. Said yesterday he prefers to move on. We'll see how Washington ends up reacting to this. Naturally, they're in no position to have to grant him a trade, but we'll see if this ends up happening before the season begins or if McLaurin ends up playing with Jaden Daniels for another season. Same could be said for Micah Parsons in Dallas. His contract situation continues to roll on. There's more reports this morning. Diana Rossini says that their relationship is basically over, and the Cowboys are not any closer to a new contract than they were several months ago, and Jerry Jones prefers to deal with Parsons himself as opposed to his agent. Needless to say, none of this stuff is working well for Jerry Jones. I got to get this figured out before the season begins. All right, preseason began last night, 34-7 the final, in case you missed it. The Chargers end up going wild on the Detroit Lions in game 1. You don't see 41 points scored in the first preseason game, but Trey Lance, who's now on the Chargers, had his way with the Lions defense. Also, Mike Tomlin said his relationship with quarterback Aaron Rodgers is a bromance. All right, that's good news here on the show. Buffalo Bills given the highest grade in the new uniform NFL report card. And in the NBA, Mikal Bridges got a contract extension with the New York Knicks. Falls under the radar because, again, so much happening in baseball and football. 4 years, $150 million gives the Knicks some flexibility. We're joined by Pat Evans of Legal Sports Report. Pat's got a new gig, by the way, we'll be talking to you about next week here on the show. And, of course, still going to make appearances for us and discuss the world of sports betting. But for now, let's say Pat Evans of Legal Sports Report. By the way, everything cool with Pat. No drama or anything else like, some like Micah Parsons or Terry McLaurin, and that's all not happening. Very amicable. Pat, welcome back to the show. I know you love Fridays, so we got some hot topics here to talk about. Let's start off in Chicago. We're seeing this flat sports betting fee and percentages being added all across the country, a quarter, 50 cents. Just depends on who you ask and the way things go in legislation. Things can change at any time. So is Chicago now going like a different direction as to what we thought previously?
I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but this is just potentially more bad news for sports books in Illinois. I mean, if you've been following this and listening to this show when we're on from LSR, I mean, yeah, 2 years ago, or I guess it was last year, the Illinois government went from a 15% flat rate sports betting tax to a tiered system from 20 to 40% based on how much revenue those sports books are doing. Well, on top of that, this year, the budget included a new thing where you bet for the first 20 million bets from a sports book, you get a 25-cent per bet tax for the sports books. Well, that jumps to 50 cents per bet when you go over those 20 million bets. So that's in itself, the sports books are pretty upset. We've seen 6 now. Bet Rivers just announced a $1 minimum bet on top of Hard Rock is $2, BetMGM's $2.50 minimum bets. And then, of course, FanDuel, DraftKings, and Fanatics all have a per bet fee that's included in their sports book bet bets now. Like, you just can't place a bet without paying that extra bit. Well, now you've got the Chicago City Council saying, hey, that's not a bad idea. Maybe we can institute a 50-cent per bet tax. It's nothing officially proposed or anything like that. It was just floated as something they've looked at. Based on their estimations, they could make up to $40 to $41 million a year in this per bet tax. But you really have to wonder, based on the action these sports books have already undergone to kind of mitigate the effect of this new per bet tax fee that just went into effect July 1st, how much another 50 cents from just a city could play into what they might do and how they offer things to customers. So this is just something to keep an eye on. Again, nothing official from the Chicago City Council, but it's being floated. And when people start seeing more tax dollars, you have to wonder what happens in the long run. Of note, Chicago does have a per bet or a tax included in-person bets, which of course is only at Wrigley Field right now at a DraftKings, and they haven't made a ton of money, only something, $20,000-$40,000 or whatever it is. So not huge, but they are looking at it and saying we want to get ours somehow from this industry.
All right, now let's move on to a story that we'll follow up on with you. We had Sam McQuillan on earlier this week, Pat. He said that, maybe some progress being made in the state of Georgia in a year that we're making virtually no progress in sports betting. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Missouri is the only city or state this year that's going to legalize sports betting and have it go online. That will happen in December. Other than that, we're not going to get any other state legalized. Is Georgia a possibility for 2026, Pat?
I think we're getting there. I think this is something, I mean, as long as I've been coming on this show for 4 years almost now, we're looking at Georgia. Georgia's one of those states that we're always, the chances are pretty good, because there are efforts. And every year there's multiple bills introduced to legalize sports betting. But there's different opinions from the legislators how they want to get it done. Some say, not want, a constitutional amendment is necessary to pass that, and that includes a vote by the voters at the ballot box. But then others say, well, no, we can just legalize it under the lottery and it's fine. And just simple as that. So there's that different opinion, and they clash. And then, of course, as we always talk about in the Southeast, there's quite a bit of pushback from the religious right, who say, gambling is immoral and we don't want to legalize that at all. And so you have that going on. But of course, the last couple of years, we've seen efforts get nearly to the finish line and then stall out because of these differences. Well, now we finally have a House study committee that started meeting this week and will continue to meet until they make recommendations in December of, hey, what do we need to do gambling in Georgia? The first meeting was largely based about casino gambling, so it didn't really touch on sports betting. That'll be touched on in the coming months, and as will pari-mutuel horse racing betting options. So we'll get, come December, some recommendations from legislators on how they think it's best to do it and how we go forward. There was a bill that is still alive from this last session that will get picked up in January, February, whenever they come back to the session. And we'll see what happens. That would go through the constitutional amendment process, which would include a vote in November 2026. So not doing it this year doesn't set it back very much at all, if any, based on what the timeline could be. So if that does happen, you'd see a 2027 launch. So we'll see if that goes ahead. But yeah, slow progress in Georgia, but I think this is more progress maybe than ever, because now we can finally see lawmakers come together, say, hey, this is what we like, what we don't like, why we disagree. Can we come to a nice agreement? And rather than do it kind of off session and in a calmer setting, maybe, than trying to shove things all through the legislative process when you're trying to get things done before adjourning. So yeah, a little bit of progress I think we're seeing in Georgia here.
Let's end with a discussion that I think is going to be a hot topic in the future, especially with what's gone on in college sports and now, of course, Pat, in Major League Baseball. That is prop bets. And it seems like state by state and more legislatures are basically asking the question, why? Why, with all of the betting options, why do we need to have prop bets? And look, as somebody that personally would love to give all sports betting, fans and people who like to bet options, the groundswell is coming here. I mean, if anything happens with this Cleveland Guardians story, Pat, I think you're going to see the elimination of betting on pitches.
Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, I think this is directly related to the Guardians situation, where, of course, two pitchers have been placed on leave, at least one of them for suspicious pitching activities that integrity monitors have targeted and said, "Hey, this is a little weird. Let's check this out." Governor Mike DeWine came out and said, "Let's end prop betting. This isn't good." And of course, this isn't the first issue we've seen. As you mentioned, it's been happening across the country, but we've had in Ohio, some Dayton Flyer basketball players were targeted by bettors who were upset about prop bets. And so back in 2023, we saw the lead regulator there in Ohio say, "We can't do this. We should get rid of these." Of course, that hasn't happened yet, but now you got the governor saying the same thing based on this Guardian situation. And yeah, you have to wonder what's going to happen, because to your point, people are familiar with these now. People expect these offerings. They want to do this. It's not a brand new thing. So maybe they then look offshore and say, "Let's go back there." So it's going to be a very tricky thing to figure out moving forward. Of course, in New Jersey, we have a new bill that is eliminating in-game wagering because of the impulsiveness that they say it encourages from bettors. Kind of the same situation here, and it is a little bit riskier than maybe some just straight bets on games and such when you get down to integrity monitoring issues. So yeah, to your point, it just adds to the growing headwinds against the online gambling industry that we've seen, and whether that's the advertising framework that we've seen proposed at a national level, or just the state level regulators saying, "Okay, we need to figure out what kind of bets are good for bettors and what kind put people and athletes at a bigger risk." So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Governor Mike DeWine said no more prop bets in Ohio, or he doesn't want them. Of course, they still are allowed for the time being, but that's what he's asking for.
Yeah, and honestly, especially focusing on Emmanuel Clase here for a minute, we don't know exactly what happened, and
Sure.
it's possible that nothing has happened, and these are just an investigation. But Pat, if
Yep.
Clase is found to have any wrongdoing, to me, Pat, this is the biggest game changer, because yes, we've seen it a little bit in the NBA, but Class A makes a lot of money relative to
He
us,
does,
to the
and
world.
he's a big name. So
Yeah. And if he is found to have any improprieties, it would, honestly at that point means, even if you're making millions of dollars and you're still willing to stupidly bet on yourself or on sports, there could be time for a change. Good to see you, Pat. We'll see you back Monday.
yeah, back.